2021. It had all the shit of 2020, but it wasn't new anymore. Things were gonna be stuck this way for a while. The initial shock of what happened the year before wore off. This was the price paid for shutting down the world for a whole year. There's no doubt that we're going to be feeling the reverberations from the nuke that was the pandemic for a long time, and I think this year was the first time we got a chance to move some rubble aside to assess the damages. Let the dust settle, you know? It was time to process. So much of this fuck-ass year was shrouded in uncertainty. Remember all the drama about new COVID variants coming out every week? All that supply chain stoppage? Could we leave the house yet? Who knows? People were out of money now, and the desire and restlessness for a return to normalcy was kicking in. Suddenly, everyone wasn't so happy about the masks anymore. The Zoom remote stuff was cute, but it was time to come back to school, or the office, but under strict guidelines. In the last recap video I did for 2020, I mentioned that there was still a general amount of compassion and understanding regarding any one person's individual hardships. These were tough times, and people had unique struggles in the wake of that. But in 2021, that shit was gone, out the window. Get the fuck back to work, pussy. Oh, your grandma died? Who gives a fuck? My Walmart used to be 24 hours, and now they close early. Ask me if I give a shit. Aside from all the external chaos, I personally had maybe the worst year of my life this year. But we won't get into that now. Stick around until the end of the video if you want to hear more about that. I'm a trauma dump on you. My point that I was gonna make with that is music has been free therapy for me for most of my adulthood, and boy oh boy did I need some therapy in 2021. Maybe the worst part is, I felt like I couldn't openly deal with my shit because God, why should I be complaining? So many people this year lost their livelihood, or worse, their lives, but I just want to showcase that external turmoil only made internal turmoil more, turmoily. Alright, sorry, before we get going, I feel like I gotta do this every time because someone watching right now might not know yet. About 4 or 5 years ago, I started a blog where I went over my best albums of the year, but in 2024, I made a video about it, and I thought that was a cooler format, so now I'm revisiting my old list and doing one for those too. Okay, alright, let's continue. So yeah, this might just be a list of my favorite albums from 2021, but just know that to me, it's more of a thank you letter to the artists that made each day in dystopia more bearable. It's time to mention some things honorably, and first up is Frailty from Jane Remover. Feels like 100 gecs meets Porter Robinson meets A.G. Cook. Very noisy and fuzzy and blown out. Some magic moments, but not fleshed out enough for me to rank it officially. Also gonna give a shout out to Rural Internet, who dropped 2 very inventive and lively albums in somewhat the same vein, Breaking Up and Escape Room. Despite each of these having a bit of a craggy exterior and Hot Topic-ish sheen to them, there are a whole heap of angsty bangers with bold production and witty lyrics on both of these guys that had me jumping around. Let's slide over to more of the rap side of things now with Haram from Arm & Hammer and The Alchemist, who continue to build their strong catalogs. Not either of them at their fullest power, but still good at sounding like a calm nightmare. Nas sounding energized on King's Disease 2. First time his music has really hit me fresh out of the box since any of those releases during his prime back in the 90s. Lastly, and this is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine, Ghost with Skin by Corbin. I am well aware that this is a flawed project, and as a whole, this entire thing might be more mediocre and reductive, but this is my list. I do what I want. Go make your own list. Before this, Corbin had not dropped since 2017 with Mourn, a dark wave, ambient tunnel of dejection. But on Halloween of this year, we got arguably an even more cold, apathetic follow-up. It might sound stripped down and almost like a step back, more towards the emo rap-centered R&B we got during the spooky Black days, which I was fine with. But this feels like rock bottom emotionally for Corbin. The desperation for solace and expression of disrepair in both his vocals and lyrics only further resonated with me as I sunk deeper into my own demoralized state this year. Being at your lowest, listening to this, that's when it hits. Absolute misery and emotional paralysis sometimes speaks its own language. Anyways, I find that tracks 1 through 7 are near perfect, but the rest here are bleh. Who's ready for some numbers? Because I'm doing them. Keep in mind that there are some new additions and subtractions from my original list, because since then, we've had a couple individuals who will not be named be extremely stupid and abhorrent. More room for those deserving, you get me? But alright, what's better to break us into this thing than some piping hot gumbo by Pink Siifu. Number 15 on this list is an aptly titled project because it offers a whole range of flavors to sample from. Quite literally. But don't get it twisted. Just like the dish it's named after, this album has Southern influence written all over it. I was sitting there like,
you can go get me some biscuits talking like that.
This album is the king of the combo. The intro track is spacey and soulful, and then you just get hit with the heat on track 2. The whole record is like this. The way that no tone lingers too much and no single track gets stretched thin keeps it fresh. Even the old and new sound appear to be in harmony. Siifu takes his love for his OGs like Outkast, Lil Wayne, and the Dungeon Family, and then reshapes that sound with a futuristic edge. It's reminiscent of his contemporaries like Migos or even pre-2020 Playboi Carti, but somehow paves its own new lane. Number 14, I Lie Here, Buried with My Rings and My Dresses by Backwash. This is an industrial hip-hop album that takes zero prisoners. Backwash confronts everything from religion, substance use and abuse, racism, corporate capitalism, and her own mental health. You get a real sense of the frustration and building resentment within the LGBTQ community that this album, which dropped in the midst of the deadliest year for US transgender people ever, by the way, brings to a head. You'd expect to hear this kind of music at an after-hours cemetery rager held by a band of vampires in rave gear. I swear I wanted to start dressing like Jim Carrey from Once Bitten after I heard this for the first time. It gives me that kind of uncomfortable intrigue that few things do. It terrified me, but had me ready to hear more. No seatbelts, baby. If you are a fan of horrorcore and the more aggressive, noisy side of rap music, get ready for a ride. Lucky 13, and I gotta show some love to Detroit here with Van Gogh's Left Ear by Z Loopers. I am a fan of most products that come from Motown, and that includes Bruiser Brigade, which I have followed closely since I latched onto Danny Brown, who draws a lot of similarities to Z Loopers, something you'll be able to tell right off the bat if you haven't heard him yet. I would actually argue that Z somehow manages to get a lot wackier and more varied in his approach sometimes. I've always liked his work, but never got to see him deliver an album experience, if you know what I mean. Valley of Life in 2020 was close to hitting my list, but here with Van Gogh's Left Ear, it's hard to deny the artistry anymore. This is easily his best put together and well orchestrated project to date. Energy, energy, energy. That's the best way to describe this. Most tracks come, do their thing, and move on to the next totally different banger without wasting much time at all. The hype train keeps chugging for way longer than you'd expect. This record even has that somber and more serious point that you'd anticipate in a standard full-fledged album, and it's actually a highlight. The more personal moments come as welcome additions. Huge step forward musically for Z Loopers. Check this out. It's his best stuff. At number 12 is Volcanic Bird Enemy in the Voiced Concern from Lil Ugly Mane. This shit sounds like depression. My first experience with anything by Mr. Travis Miller here, who is apparently a legend in the underground rap scene, but this is not even really close to a rap project. If anything, it's more like a hypnagogic pop alternative kind of deal. This sounds like being totally fucking lost in life and fading in and out of benders, spending days rotting indoors. It's dreamlike and whimsical, often with absurd images painted from the lyrics, but also often downtrodden and abstract. You have your more psychedelic cuts and shoegazy ones, but then there's stuff that's completely sample heavy or totally instrumental. It's very off the wall and hard to describe, so you should just listen to it yourself if you haven't. This is a contender for many as album of the year. I do not find it quite consistent enough to be in that upper echelon for me, but definitely one of my more interesting and affecting encounters with music. Number 11, How About We Do Spelling with The Turning Wheel. It's only on here because Fantano gave it a 10. Haha, can you imagine? Okay, jokes aside, I honestly wouldn't have listened to this if it wasn't for his high praise. I don't think I've ever had quite a journey with an album like this before, because this is easily the most epic piece of work I've heard in a while, and by that, I mean that I have never been subjugated to a more colorful, vibrant, and spectacular musical arrangement like this one. This is the kind of music that you'd expect to be paired with a huge stage production with hundreds of dancers and visuals to coincide with the kaleidoscopic and often transcendental vision that Spelling, aka Cristia Cabral, holds up here. Everything on this record just feels alive. The luscious strings sweep you in on a twinkling magic carpet ride, and the bright horn sections gyrate with enough force to blow your hair back while you're on it. It's like watching one of those ultra high budget nature productions like Planet Earth, but in album form. While the music is spectacular, I can't put this any higher, I'm gonna be honest, because I can't always walk around with Cupid's arrow in my ass. It's amazing in the moment, but it does not leave a lasting effect on me for too long. But while I'm present with this, Spelling has me spellbound. At 10 is Call Me If You Get Lost from Tyler the Creator, the first album post-Igor. And with this round, Tyler did what all artists do after dropping an opus, and that's take a big ol' victory lap to soak in the glory. This is Tyler rightfully popping some champagne and letting everyone know he is one of the best in the industry. This album has a lot of the boastful and aggressive Tyler that we grew accustomed to before Flower Boy, but also the introspective and sensitive Tyler that we have come to know and love after it. This record aims to take the listener on a luxurious European vacation with expensive meals, lavish modes of transportation, and a scandalous love affair steadily sneaking in from the background. It's just cool to hear someone in their prime making good music with ease. He knows exactly what should go where, and each feature he brings on slots in perfectly enough to elevate whatever track it's on. Moving to number 9 is JPEG Mafia with LP, specifically the offline edition, because that has Hazard Duty pay, and you can't really skip that one. Yeah, dude, Peggy came in with another killer album to the surprise of nobody, and this is your proof in broad daylight that all of the fuckery going on in the world since his last major release did not put out his flame at all. The man is still full steam ahead, and you can really hear him get more powerful here. He's ready to come down from the top rope with a fucking flying elbow on anybody in his path. The bars and flows are all consistently awesome, and it's so fun to see a jack of all trades like Peggy in his bag, doing whatever he wants, and doing it well. Rate Your Music voting and rankings has this as number 1 for the year, so if that doesn't tell you how highly people think of this, then I don't know. At number 8, we've got Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine, the last good Brockhampton effort. As if keeping the band together wasn't probably hard enough, rallying the troops after the COVID shutdown for something this immense is impressive. They even found a way to work a good amount of features into this. You'd think that throwing in too many voices would detract from the final product, but it's that continual push to showcase something different that makes Brockhampton who they are. You can never have too many cooks in the kitchen with these guys. It's always going to just be another means to form a different Megazord. The trend that I've noticed with many of the titles on this year's list of mine is that they share very therapeutic traits. Sure, all music does that to an extent, but these ones feel more direct in their response to the world being on fire. The standout voice behind this project is Joba, who unpacks a horrifying dosage of trauma. It's seriously hard to listen to at some points, but just know that the group seems to rally behind him to tie together this track list with themes of holding on to hope for better days. The light is worth the wait, I promise, wait, was my motto for much of the year. And I gotta thank the boys for being so open, because it helped me as well as probably many others. We are at number 7 now, and my best buddy Rennick deserves some credit for this one, because he put me on to the best hardcore punk rock album I've heard in a long time. Turnstile's Glow On. Sometimes this album makes me feel like I'm floating, but that's probably because it gives me a fucking falcon punch into the sky so frequently. I saw Turnstile's set briefly at Camp Flogna 2018 and wasn't that intrigued to hear more, but god do I regret ignoring any hype around this. I have to commend Glow On too for being so accessible. Just about anybody I know can rock along to this because they ease you in by bending so many genres and yet always come back to that through line of hardcore punk. I don't have much else to say other than that. This is straight heat. You'll be happy to hear I got a chance to right my wrongs. By the way, I saw these guys at Flognaw 2023 and threw myself in the mosh like a proper fan. At number 6, we have what I consider to be the definitive release of the COVID era with Inside by Bo Burnham. I haven't seen anything embody or recapture the feelings of that time quite like this does. It asks us, how can one's brain generate anything of substance or discover real artistic merit within themselves without adequate stimulation? How are you supposed to craft a vibrant film, song, or story when you're staring at the same set of walls for 24 hours a day and 7 days a week? What the heck ever happened to the comedy album anyway? Bo Burnham put those questions to the test this year. He somehow debuted what feels like a totally new art form and then also resurrected a few old ones in the summer of 21 with a Netflix special that quickly became the talk of the town on social media. People were flocking to see it, whether they knew of Bo's work or not, and it resonated with many. This encapsulates being inside, not just in the shadow of the pandemic, but really for anybody who's depressed out of their mind. Yeah, at the risk of severe permanent mental fatigue, making something out of nothing is possible, and this project is a testament to that. Stark realizations are made in the face of great dread. I have a favorite Susan Sontag quote that goes like this: "One of the tasks art has assumed is making forays into and taking up positions on the frontiers of consciousness and reporting back what's there. Being a freelance explorer of spiritual dangers, the artist gains a certain license to behave differently from other people. Matching the singularity of his vocation, he may be decked out with a suitably eccentric lifestyle, or he may not. His job is inventing trophies of his experiences." She said all this in an essay titled The Pornographic Imagination in 1967, and I feel like it heavily applies to what Burnham is doing with Inside. He manages to explore his own psyche, the rapid succession of the digital age, and what it would feel like to live in end times, all with a comedic angle that deeply connects with almost everybody who engages with it. This album and the visual media that it originates from has so much to say about the current state of humanity and our increasing cybernetic tendencies that we're forming. It's one thing to pull this off while being funny, but the music itself is excellent. It's as thought-provoking as it is entertaining. I'd go as far to call it genius. I guarantee you that if you watch the Netflix special, whether you've seen it before or not, at least some of those dumbass songs will get stuck in your head, and then you'll end up right on Bo's music streaming page, just like I did. Top 5. If you haven't already, you're going to start to notice a theme of trauma in this final set of records that I'm going to talk about. And Kristen Hayter, formerly known as Lingua Ignota, works through trauma with a capital T on Sinner Get Ready. Back in 2019, when her album Caligula was making the rounds as one of the highest critically acclaimed albums of the year, I walked away from it feeling conflicted. It was impactful as hell, but a few things kept me from fully attaching to it like I could have. Namely, there's a sort of musical jump scare approach that's applied to so much of the record that kept me at bay. Stuff like that doesn't horrify me, it distracts me, especially when the horrific material already exists so prominently in Hayter's shrill instrumentation, chilling vocal delivery, and harrowing lyrics. Sinner Get Ready feels like everything I wanted out of Caligula, and more. It's an improvement in every way, if you allow it to. This record sort of takes you on a spiritual healing journey, partly because of how the energy within the music shifts, but also how the tone begins to parallel a real human metamorphic process. Mostly every song in the first half sounds like something bad is about to happen. It's like there's a terrible storm approaching and you don't have much time to prepare. But then, just as things get real grim, there are several shockingly breathtaking sections of euphoria. Couple that with the aforementioned abrasiveness that comes with sonically working through hardcore shit, and much of this album sounds like the soundtrack to some lonely self-exorcism in the middle of a field somewhere. My utmost appreciation to Kristen and all survivors of abuse who find the strength to share their stories. Thank you. Number 4 is a huge riser, maybe the most dramatic surge up one of my lists ever, all the way up from the original spot at 15, Porter Robinson, Nurture. This is a masterclass in uplifting music. When I made my original 2021 ranking, I thought I was way too cool to put this any higher than 15th because I was Mr. Woeful, but I can't even begin to tell you how much of a pick-me-up this album is. Truly inspirational shit right here. It has me loving life again with all its color and grandeur. It's as fluffy and amiable as it looks. Cover Art of the Year award, this is exactly how it feels. Again, I've said this before, but Porter has this like 2011 Minecraft or Dude Perfect video pop sound that's almost cringe, but just towing that line enough to still be fucking phenomenal and timeless music. It's very, dare I say, nurturing? The beautiful, tasteful use of piano coding this track list is a nice touch that helps you feel less drowned out by some of the more blaring electronic layers that come flooding in occasionally. I cannot get over how uplifting this project is, and it's not corny in the slightest about it. It's genuine and joyous and extremely self-aware. This whole LP is about feeling better, man. Being thankful and mindful and appreciative of any progress you've made or that you will make. We all need a little life breathed into us, and this was a perfect way to get some in 2021. It still is now. At our number 3 spot is another one that took a big climb. I think it was originally at 12, don't quote me on that. But God, has this been influential as hell on me. Absolutely. By Dijon. All these people out there are complaining about Frank Ocean going missing, like his reincarnation isn't right here. I found out about this project through the recommendation of Gene Dawson, who many of you may know is my favorite current artist, so thank you, Gene. This kicks so much ass, and the ready-made approach is one of the most inventive and boundary-pushing ways to make an album that I've ever heard. It's purposefully rough around the edges, almost like it was all recorded in one sitting. The incredible Absolutely film, which I can't help but rewatch like every month at this point, recaptures the essence of this debut LP perfectly. Everyone's just sitting around a table, drinking beers, playing their instruments. There's obviously a ton of Bon Iver influence in the sound here, you'll be able to pick that up quickly, and I wasn't surprised in the slightest to see the two go on tour together following this album's release. I know I don't often talk about individual tracks, but many times is in contention for my favorite song of this year, and if you listen to any song that I bring up on this list, it should be that one. This album is just radiating creativity and spur-of-the-moment brilliance. Dijon's vocals are very imperfect, with plenty of rugged, poignant yelps and voice cracks mixed in with the gritty, raw instrumentation that feels very vintage. The forlorn lyrics get darker and more desperate as the tracks go along. So much so to where the final few cuts are just total cries for someone to stay. Just stay. I'm not saying this is a breakup album because it's way more complicated than that, but this is something that you have to listen to if you're heartbroken. The garage pop aesthetic I keep harping on only elevates the energy to heights that I feel are hard to recreate. Lightning in a bottle type stuff. There's a good reason why Dijon and Big Mike over here are your favorite artist's favorite artists. They have ushered in a whole new sound. We could be looking back on Absolutely as a big old point where things shifted. This number 2 pick I'm about to talk about is probably the number 1 spot holder in almost any year but this one. I cannot stress how good this is. It's the unbelievable triumph by Little Simz. Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, aka Simbi. My first experience with Little Simz was back in 2019 with her awesome record Gray Area, which is extremely sharp. If that was supposed to be a refined, tight, and somewhat minimalist album, then Sometimes I Might Be Introvert is her commitment to constructing a grandiose, maximalist soundscape. It's got the kind of sonic vibrancy you could hear all the way from the fucking moon, and the impactful statements you'd expect to see from some of hip-hop's greatest, most iconic works. The flavor palette here is so satisfying to take in. The fabulous and often illustrious instrumentals coupled with Sim's very diverse set of flows make this entire track list a delight to the senses. It's like hearing someone level up their musical skill tree in real time. I like to keep the favorite track section down here at 3, so I can showcase what I feel are the biggest standouts that represent an album, but this one hurts to do that with. I'd recommend just about anything from here but the interludes. They're fine, and they add to the luxurious sound of the LP, but maybe can get a tad corny. Still, I want to make clear that my number one album that's coming up isn't an easy listen. It won't be for everybody, but I would confidently say that this is. So if there's anything that you have not heard on this top 15 right here that I think you'll definitely like, it's this. I can't see anyone in their right mind not being blown away by at least one or two cuts from this. Gold standard for a hip-hop album as far as I'm concerned. Well guys, welcome to the number one spot. We're here. By the time I get to Phoenix by Injury Reserve, I don't even know where to start with this. This album sounds like End Times. When I first heard it, I didn't even know what to make of it. The fact that this project outright exists is sort of insane. 2020 was the worst year that many of us have experienced on this planet. I don't want to be dramatic, but the world did kind of end for a second. It was reported to be the deadliest year in US history, and as time passed, it began to feel more and more like the rapture would be coming any day. As I mentioned in the prelude to this list, one of the few things that can rise from the ashes of true tragedy is some great art. I knew going into this year that so many music makers would devote much of 2021 to simply processing what the hell happened the year before, and what is still happening. Enter Injury Reserve, a trio from Arizona that was finally picking up steam in the hip-hop world with their self-titled 2019 album. They were the hitmakers that were notorious for not getting the recognition that they deserved. Sadly, they suffered their own tragedy, as it was announced in June of 2020 that one of the group's members, Stepa J. Groggs, tragically passed away at age 32. So, this album is every bit as personal as it is society sweeping. This at times sounds like the mutated offspring of something left over from a nuclear holocaust. It's like someone left a regular rap album in Chernobyl for all these years. The gross, pitched, and muffled vocals mixed with the distorted, glitchy, and industrial production form this kind of toxic soup of an album. It's auditory devastation. I can tell that all of that time that they spent on tour with Slauson Malone before this rubbed off on them, because the absolute abuse of whatever typical Injury Reserve sound that you may have come to expect is all the way up front now. Honestly, the monstrous emotional cries that ring out from this dilapidated record would have me shutting down afterward. If it weren't for the last track, By Storm. I don't want to spoil the album experience for anyone who hasn't heard it, but this song, this ending song, almost made me cry like an idiot. There's just something about picturing that day that you can finally say, it's over. It's finally fucking over after being in the pits for so long. A lot of the time, this imagined ending, this idea of turning the page once and for all, is what gets so many of us out of bed in the morning. This record proves that artists are still very much necessary, perhaps even paramount, in a post-apocalyptic world, because someone needs to explore and reflect upon what has transpired. Someone needs to assign meaning to the catastrophic events that plague the modern experience on planet Earth here. Groundbreaking album. If you've ever dealt with true grief, deflation, or straight up mental decay before, then it might strike a chord in your soul somewhere. Sorry for the delays on this video, guys. Honestly, I normally would have had this out a month or two after the 2020 list, but going back to this year put me in a sort of bad headspace for a while. I got seriously depressed for a good minute, I'm not gonna lie. I kept going back to writing this, and I just kept getting reminded of how miserable I was. The hard truth is, and I know I already said this at the beginning, but 2021 was absolutely the worst year of my life. You can go now, if you like, by the way. I just feel like sharing some context into my own personal struggles and hardships in a time capsule sort of way. It'll be good to look back on for myself. Also, I feel like it kind of helps you get in the headspace that I was at when making this ranking. But picking up from where I left off in the 2020 video, I had just graduated college. Things were looking optimistic, if not uncertain, but it was the middle of the pandemic, and I had very little to call sustainable. I could not land a job, as everything required tons of experience, and all I had was a lousy degree, which honestly I was starting to feel tricked into getting. My whole life I was threatened by those older than me that if I didn't go to college, I'd never get a good job. And here I was saying, okay, I'm ready now. Where's that job I was told would be needing me? I know a fair bit of the process involved in getting work requires hustle, but do you know how demoralizing it is to hear no or you're not the right fit for basically a year straight? Companies were still at pandemic staff levels, but weren't acting like it anymore, so it was infuriating. Meanwhile, everybody I talked to said I just wasn't trying hard enough to get out of my rut. Everybody. I was borrowing money from my family and sitting at home all day online and applying to, no joke, like 30 positions a day. Meanwhile, I was just trying to write enough content to keep an income, and sales from the book that I dropped in 2020 stopped almost entirely. To be honest, in hindsight, I should have been on disability because of a previous health condition that I won't go into right now. But just know that at the time, I was on over 200 milligrams of antidepressants a day. During all these hours at home, time just seemed to blend together. I stopped showering, stopped getting dressed, stopped caring about what I ate or what it did to me. I no longer felt like I had a reason to. Look at me. I was fucking fat. I remember I had just gotten done with another week of job interviews, and I got a call from one of the ones where I was among the final candidates saying that they chose another guy. I called my dad after to let him know. I just was feeling pretty hopeless, and he threatened to pull my health insurance and stop giving me help to pay for food if I didn't get a job soon. He eventually ended up doing that. Again, he probably subscribed to the idea that I just wasn't trying hard enough, which was so upsetting because I felt like all anybody had known about me back then was that all I ever did was try. I tried way harder than anyone else next to me. I remember hanging up after and then just screaming in the car for hours. I wasn't home that night like a lot of others because my girlfriend and I were fighting basically any time we were in the same room together. Also, my best friend at the time had cut off all contact with me, seemingly at random. We wound up having an argument about all this, and he hasn't spoken to me ever since. He was basically all I had as someone to go and talk to for immediate help or advice. I tried many times to go and apologize for any/everything, but I think he was checked out himself. I don't know, stubbornness, depression. To this day, I still don't know. To this day, it tears me up. We had so much planned for our lives by each other's side. We had made promises that in spite of all the shit going on, we would be there for one another. I'm getting married in a few months, and it's hard. It's really hard to talk about because he was supposed to be up there next to me. Knowing that people like him or my dad won't be at my wedding because of broken relationships that couldn't be healed, it hurts so bad. Some days I blame myself, saying it must have been me. Other days I get totally upset that I thought that because I never gave up and there's nothing I could have done. On the hardest days it feels like the source of all my regrets, and I never got closure on any of that I just mentioned. By the end of 2021, I was thinking about ending my life almost every night, just going missing emotionally. Luckily, I was so unmotivated, I couldn't even form a good plan on how to actually pull the plug. I was lucky enough to get a call for an entry-level part-time job around the holidays, and I jumped on it. I know it doesn't sound like it, but right before I got that call, everything seemed irreparable and inescapable. I didn't have a soul on my side, and part of that was because I isolated myself so much that any semblance of a connection I may have had or established with anybody went cold. And that's about where I was by the time 2022 began. I always describe 2021 like it's a purgatory of sorts. I was stuck in limbo, often careening back and forth between total motivation and total deflation. Okay, imagine a desert island scenario where you're stranded alone. Tom Hanks type beat. You're working real hard to just make it through each day while you wait for rescue. You know you're very lost, too lost to make it off that bitch on your own. You've tried, but you don't see any land. The fact of the matter is, some dinghy or fisher boat needs to spot you and give you a lift. Once you get back to society, you gotta reacclimate and all that. And that's part of the castaway experience too. What I'm trying to show here with this metaphor is that 95% of it is indeed work that you gotta do yourself, yes. But it all hinges on that third party, aka a boat, coming along. In my case, it was an entry-level job returning my call and maybe a friend of mine inviting me to play slow-pitch softball. That got me back to the mainland. In some other instance, maybe it's yours, it may be a family member or friend. So many people, though, do not make it off the island. They lost hope of any rescue. Guys, be the boat. No matter how big and heroic you are or are not, be the boat for somebody. Please. That does not mean taking on all their problems. I'm looking at you, all my codependent, altruist type people. Just get them to shore. I'm sorry, but in the world we live in right now, at least some of your needs cannot be met without help. And that's both terrifyingly shitty and reassuringly encouraging. Anyways, yeah, I'm really proud of how far I've come since this year, because it has been a lot of hard work, but that didn't get done until later, so you'll have to wait on the next list video for me to recap that. When I first wrote up this list on the original blog, I talked about returning to form, but I didn't yet realize that I needed to just start from scratch and rebuild, blow it all up, and work from a clean foundation. Again, I'll cover that in the next one. Enough mopey shit. 22 was another fun one to cover as far as music goes. Again, drop suggestions and I'll totally shout you out if I discover something new because of you. I am very much looking forward to hearing all this, so stay tuned. And also, thanks again for listening if you made it this far.